Good evening, everyone. I am so gratified to see Professor Ya's presentation. I will admit I didn't understand all of it, but I was very happy that the program has an outline. And I want to thank Case and Sanctuary Church for putting this event together. You know, we have all seen a great deal of anti-Asian hate, and Professor Ya has taken us through a 150-year history leading up to what we have all experienced these last few years. I just am here to join my colleagues in government. We have Assemblymember Ron Kim, the first Korean American to be elected to the state legislature. He's up next, but give him a round of applause. Ron is on the speaking circuit. He's going to make a speech here, and at the same time, babysitting his 3 daughters. So this is a talented man here. And we're also joined by Assemblymember Grace Lee, who is the first Korean American woman to be elected to the state legislature. So Grace, say hello. And the 3 of us are working on exactly what Professor Ya has been advocating all around the country. That we in New York State need some kind of Asian American studies in our schools. I've seen textbooks that are being used today, where there's a reference to the construction of the railroads in the 1800s, a quick reference to Japanese Americans being put in prison camps during World War II. That's it. No mention of Vincent Chin's killing, no mention of the boycotts in LA and in Brooklyn, no mention of the post 9/11 attacks against South Asians. And, you know, when people don't understand us, it makes us easy targets. We get blamed. We get blamed for global pandemic, for economic recession, or international conflicts. We get blamed. Asians are the #1 biggest group to be scapegoated. And it's easy to blame us. People don't know what we are. They either think we're the model minority, or we're perpetual foreigners who are at worst yellow peril. And that's all they know. 2,000 Americans asked last year, a survey, 2,000 Americans, name one Asian American. Name one Asian American. 58% couldn't even name one. And the 42% who could name one, the #1 response was Jackie Chan. You know, Jackie Chan, I mean, I guess his movies are a little funny, too funny for me, but he's okay. But he's from Hong Kong. He's not Asian American. And the second biggest response was Bruce Lee. Now, I like Bruce Lee, but rest his soul, he's been dead for 30 years. The point is, you ask most Americans about Asian Americans, or even to name one Asian American, they can't even name one. And so it's easy to blame us. And that's why, you know, people have talked about with all the anti-Asian hate, we should put people in jail longer, we should have more hate crime statutes. I mean, honestly, from my perspective, and I believe Assemblymember Kim and Assemblymember Lee shares this perspective, we don't necessarily think that just threatening to put somebody in jail for 25% more amount of time because it's a hate crime is actually going to stop the hate crime. People are afraid and they're ignorant. And that is the root cause of hate and bigotry. The only way for us to deal with that is to have long-term solutions like education. Teaching our school kids about the Asian American experience, how we have built this country like everybody else. And that we're just as American as anybody else. And that this is our country too. And we own it. And so I think that's very important. That's why we're pushing ahead with this legislation. That is, you know, it is now 2 years that Case and Sanctuary Church have gotten together to help push this legislation. It's not going to be easy. I will admit it right up front. Some of the other states that have passed Asian American Studies legislation, they have already had other racial and ethnic studies, African American history, Latinx history, Jewish American history, and they were successful in adding Asian American history to that list. That is what other states have done. New York, we have not done that because there has not been any list in our entire history of New York. There's been no mandated curricula for any group. Our African American colleagues in the legislature have tried to mandate the teaching of African American history for the last 20 years, and they have not been able to pass that legislation yet. We think it's time that we understand the true history. The teaching of Asian American history is the teaching of history. Plain and simple. And we have to educate all of our kids. And not just teach Asian kids, teach all kids, so that we are less vulnerable to attacks and scapegoating in the future. And also, there are things that we can learn amongst ourselves too. One of the continued reminders that I got from all this anti-Asian hate these last couple of years is I think it's important to maintain a pan-Asian unity. What I mean by that is that, you know, all this anti-Asian hate, it's presumably because they blame us for this China virus. Trump kept calling it a China virus or Kung flu. And Asians were being not only attacked, they were being made fun of, said often, go back to China. Well, you know what? It wasn't just Chinese Americans who were told to go back to China. There were lots of Korean Americans who were told, go back to China. A Korean American woman, I've never been to China. So how can I go back to China? Filipino Americans, go back to China. The point is, any kind of anti-Asian hate is going to be directed at all of us in common. No one's going to stop and say, is that woman Filipino or Korean, or is she actually Chinese? That's the kind of society that we live in. And so, you know, I'm proud to be an Asian American. I say to my colleagues in government all the time, I'm Asian American, I've been Asian my whole life. But I'm not the one who was born and said, hey, I'm Asian. My Asianness was imposed upon me by the majority here. And throughout my life growing up here, I've been reminded that I'm Asian. And that reminder was never a good thing. It was always a label. So we gotta address and fight the label head on. And the only way to do that is through education. So I don't want to overstay my welcome. We're going to hear from our super dad assembly member here. And with that, Reverend Cho, thank you for everything you have done. I met Reverend Cho for the first time, it's almost 10 years now, when a tragic incident happened on the subways. And of course, Dong Chan, I've known him too long. I knew him when all his hair was black, and I actually had hair. So thank you very much for not only being part of this, but what you will do tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that, in trying to push Asian American studies and fighting this bigotry that we continue to face. Thank you, Councilman.